Okay, so we just went over all of our answers. Now we're going to go over some of the processes for this. So we're going to start with the first page, which was your 5.8, where you have to solve radical equations. Okay, now remember, when you're solving radical equations, if you can, you need to isolate the radical. Now, sometimes you have radicals on both sides and you can't do that, so we'll talk about those as well. What's a good one to start with, you think?
1.
Number 1? What?
7.
Grace, what did you do first?
Well, I subtracted 6.
Okay, so see how 6 is underneath the radical?
Yeah.
So you can't do that. So that before you can subtract the 6, what would you do first? Yeah, so first we're going to square it. So then, Grace, once we square it, then the square root squared, what happens?
7 is now 49. No.
7 squared is?
7 is 49.
Yeah, it's 49. Yeah. But what happens when you do a square root and then you square it? Anybody
You get rid of
can answer.
the radical.
Yeah, you get rid of the radical. Can anybody tell me why?
Because this just cancels. Just how it goes.
But why do they cancel? They're not opposites. They're what?
Inverses.
Inverses. So they're inverse operations. So they're going to undo each other. It's like multiplication and division. Okay, and then Grace said this is where we would subtract 6. Okay, and then I also heard number 6. Is that right?
Number 2.
That. Okay, number 2, what did you do first, Grace?
I added 5.
Okay, that's great. And then what?
And then
Did you subtract 1?
4x plus 1 equals 5.
Okay.
And then I subtracted the 1.
Okay, but now based on what we did last time, what should you do before you can subtract 1? Should have. And this time, yep, and this time you cube it. So if you have the cube root, now you're going to cube it. Okay, so Grace, see if you can finish it from there, okay? Okay, and number 6 was one that you guys mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So when you get to number 6, see how I have the number on the outside of the radical, but I have radicals on both sides? So I can't move it over. What I need to do is I need to cube both sides. Now, because I don't have anything on the outside here, I'll have 7x plus 5. But when I cube this side, I have to cube the 3, and I have to cube the cube root of x. What is 3 cubed?
27.
Yep, so this becomes 27x. And now what I'm going to do is get all of my x's on one side. So I have 20x equals 5. Now I want to get x by itself. So I'm dividing both sides by 20. So 5 divided by 20 is going to be what? 1/4. Okay, now in the directions it says we also need to check our solution. When you're checking your solution, you just want to be careful with ones that have a square root, because sometimes if you plug it back in, what might happen?
Negative number.
Yeah, you might get a negative number. Like for this one, when we check it, we get the square root of 49 to 7. Yeah, that's going to work. If we have a cube root, does it matter if we have a negative number here? No, so I would just check it to make sure that I did it correctly. What was another one? 7? Yeah, okay, number 7. So with this one, you have the radical isolated, so you're going to square both sides. Now this is what people forget to do. If you have x minus 3 squared, that's x minus 3 times x minus 3. So what do I have to do to simplify? I have to FOIL. So this becomes x squared minus 6x plus 9 when I FOIL. And now that I have an x squared and an x and a number, what should my strategy be? I should do what with all the terms? Yeah, get them all on one side, because I'm going to want to do what? Factor. Good. Okay, so I'm going to bring them all to this side because I like to keep my x squared positive. So I want two numbers that multiply to 7 that add to 8. So I'm going to do 7 and 1, which means x would equal -1 or x would equal -7. So I'm going to plug this back in and check it because it's a square root. So if I'm going to check, first I'll check -1. If I plug in -1, what's -14 times -1? 14, okay, so then this is 14 plus 2 equals -1 minus 3. This is the square root of 16 equals -4. Is that true? No. What should the square root of 16 be? 4. When you're evaluating, it should be the positive. Okay, so then this is not a possible answer. So let's try -7. Okay, so I have -14 times -7 plus 2, and then again I have -7 minus 3. When I multiply these two together, I am going to get 98, and 98 plus 2 is 100. The square root of 100, it says, equals -10. Nope. Okay, so then if none of those work when I plug them back in, then I'm going to have no solution.
Wait, did you, when it's a, you like to check it when it's a cube or a square?
Yes, you should definitely check it when it's a square because that's when you're going to get the negatives. When it's a cube, I would still check it just to make sure I did everything correctly. But with the cube root, you aren't going to get extraneous solutions because you can take the cube root of a negative number.
Yeah.
How do we do with 8? I do want to do one where you have like one of these. What about 9, 10, or 12? Okay, 12 is a good one.
Yeah.
This you have two options. First of all, because it's 1/2, 1/2 is the same thing as what? Yeah, it's the same thing as the square root. So what am I going to do to both sides? Yeah, square it. Now you can decide. Did some of you move the 4 over first?
Yeah.
I would. Because see how 4 is going to go into both sides evenly? Now you don't have to do that. Did some of you square it first?
Yeah.
If you squared it first, you do have to square the 4, which means that on the outside, what's 4 squared? 16. So then you would have 16 times 7x plus 18. And if you squared this side,
But I have
what's that?
I got 16, but I don't know.
Yep, you should have 16 times 7x plus 18 equals 16x squared.
Yeah. Oh.
Yep, so you'd have to square the 4 on this side too. So I'm going to raise this both sides to 2 because what is 1/2 times 2?
Did you square the 16?
Yeah, when you do 1/2 times 2, you get 1. Anything to the first power is going to be itself. And then what I'm going to do is subtract everything over so I can factor. So, Grace, what I did first is divided by 4 so that I could divide these out, and then 4 divided by 4 would just be x. Okay, so then I'm going to factor, so I'm looking for two values that are going to multiply to -18 but add to -7. So that would be x minus 9 and x plus 2. So x would equal 9 or x would equal -2, and then of course I need to check those. So when I check -2, I have 4. I'm just going to multiply by -2 right away. 1/2 equals 4 times -2. So this would be 4 to the 1/2. What is 4 to the 1/2? 2, because it's the square root. Okay, so I'm going to get 2 times 4, 8 equals -8. Is that true? Nope. Okay, so then this cannot be an answer. So let's check 9. So I have 4, 7 times 9 plus 18 to the 1/2 equals 4 times 9. So this this is 4 times 9 is going to be 36. Okay, so 7 times 9 is 63. What's 63 plus 18? Yep, let's do the 10 first. 73, and then 73 plus 8 is going to be 81, right? What's the square root of 81? So 4 times 9 equals 36. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so just like you can't take the square root of a negative, you also could not do the power of 1/2 with a negative. Okay, so you do want to be careful. Okay, so moving on to the inequalities. Sometimes you're going to have two cases. Sometimes you're just going to have one case. Do you guys remember when you'll have two cases and when you'll have one case?
You'll have two cases when it's
Yeah, you'll have two cases when you have the square root. So for 13, the first thing I did is I solved for x. So I added 8, took the square of both sides, and got x is less than or equal to 167. But because it's a square root, we always have to set the radicand greater than or equal to 0. And then when I do my number line, what am I trying to find? The overlap. Okay, so this is where they overlap, so I can produce my equation from there. How did we do with, like,
I got for 14, I got -3.
that? Okay, so this is a cube root, right? So if it's a cube root, then you can take the cube root of negatives, so you don't have to do a second equation. So when you cube both sides, -3 cubed is -27. And then when you cube this, you'll have 3x divided by 3. Oh, did you put 9? Yeah, so you just multiplied them. This is going to be the power. So do -3 to the third versus -3 times 3. Okay, and then for 15 and 16, all of those were square roots, so you did have to do the step 2 and find where they overlapped. Yep, okay, so for 16, the first thing you're going to want to do is square both sides. Did we do that part okay?
Yeah.
Did you guys get x is greater than 12.5? Yep, so add the 7, you'll get 25. Divide by 2, you'll get 12.5.
Is it 9 squared 81? Yeah.
Oh, and I wrote 18. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so then let's fix this. Okay, so 9 squared is going to be 81. And then we're going to add 7, and what would we get from there? 88. Divide by 2, and x would be 44. Okay, and then we still have to do 2x minus 7 is greater than or equal to 0. We'll get x is greater than or equal to 3.5. So this is actually going to be 44. And you have an open circle going to the right, a closed circle going to the right. So our overlap, say it again. You left what part is a fraction? Oh, that's fine. But then can you see where your overlap is now? It starts at 44 and is going to go all the way to the right. So then this is going to be your final answer. X is greater than 44. Okay. All right, let's look at the first part of 6.3. How do we do with plugging in those values here? Well, you have to look at the intervals. Which one did we do bad on, Grace?
I got all of them wrong, except for 4.
Okay, so for number 2, if you're finding x is -8, look here. See how this is x is less than or equal to 5? So because -8 is less than or equal to 5, this is where you're going to plug it in. So when you plug it into this equation, you have 2 minus -8. Well, 2 minus -8 is really going to be 2 plus 8, and that's how you're getting 10. And then for x equals 5, again, you have to find out what equation it fits into. So let's look at these. Is 5 less than or equal to 5? Yeah, it's equal to 5, right? So I'm going to plug it into this equation, the first one again. So 2 minus 5 is how you get your negative 3. So for both of them, you have to use equation 1. All right, for your piecewise functions, when you guys are doing your tables, remember, whatever is here is going to be the first thing on your table. See how these both have negative 2? So I'm putting negative 2 first on both of my tables, okay? Well, if this is just 6, remember we talked about that's just going to be a straight line?
Yeah.
And it's going to the left because this is for x is less than negative 2. Okay, so you could plug in other values less than negative 2 and verify that those are 6 and draw your line. Then for your second equation, 3x, x is greater than or equal to negative 2. So this, I put here the open circle, the closed circle. You can also put it here. This is the open circle. This is going to be your closed circle. When I plug in negative 2, 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. So that's going to be my first point. Then I can pick any values that are greater than or equal to negative 2. So I could try 0. Well, 3 times 0 is just going to be 0. So I can plot that point. If I plug in 2, I get 6. If I plug in 3, I get 9. And then I can make my graph from there. Now, these two graphs are never going to do what? Yeah, intersect each other. The most they could meet is at 1 point, which is what they do in 6. Again, look at this. See how this is 5? So 5 has to go on here. It's equal to, so I have a closed circle. When I plug in 5, 12 minus 5 is 7. So my first point is 5, 7. Because this is less than or equal to 5, I chose a few other values like 2 and 0. If I plug in 2, 12 minus 2 is 10. Okay, so then 2, 10 is going to be another point here. If I plug in 0, 12 minus 0 is 12. And then I'm going to continue that to the left. For the next one, it said 5. So this is x is greater than 5. So I have to start at 5, but that's going to be an open circle. And then I chose to plug in 6, 8, 10. You could choose whichever one of those you wanted. And then you're going to connect your dots. Okay? And then remember, if these points overlap, you're going to close the circle. Okay, so no targets, it'll be a closed circle. That's what you'll see. All right, for the last page, you're finding each function. So this is where, for 1 through 6, you're multiplying. So for these, you can just multiply those two together. You can't really simplify, that's fine. When you're adding, you're going to add your two terms together. Subtraction. And then again, you have multiplying, and then division. With division, a lot of times you won't be able to simplify. For this one, you were because you had a fraction. So this is 1 over 2x divided by x squared. What's the rule when you're dividing fractions? Yeah, exactly. You're going to multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, and then here, I'm just going to put these answers up there so you can look at them because I'm going to post this video. And then I'm also going to let you guys use half of a note card on your quiz tomorrow. So if you would like one of those, you can come up and get one.
Are you going to be here?
Where's the